Chapter 125 Survey of Wisdom and Foolishness in the Eastern Palace. In the middle of the Eastern Palace, there were always two schools of opinion. The school that was hostile to Xian Qima argued that since the Fan family of the Sananbo family was friendly with King Jing, and was now married to the Chancellor's family, and since the Prince of King Jing was a close friend of the second prince, and since the Chancellor was gradually estranging himself from the Eastern Palace, the Fan family must have been in the second prince's school. Xian Shaoqing, however, was firmly against this opinion, because in his opinion, Fan Jian simply could not be an ordinary minister who would move with the sleeves of King Jing's chancellor. In the heavy deep palace, Xian Qiji honestly knelt at the entrance of the study, his buttocks sticking up high. Fortunately, there were official clothes blocking it so that he didn't look ugly. "Get up!" The emperor's voice resounded within the curtain. Xinqi stood up, arms hanging at his side. "Do not dare to move the slightest." This study he also came a few times, but still cannot adapt to this natural and born of a sense of oppression. 2 drops of soybean-sized beads of sweat from the corners of his forehead slipped down. Do not know because of the end of the summer is still too hot, or nervousness caused by but he did not dare to wipe away. The curtain resounded with the sound of flipping papers. After a long time of silence, the emperor asked faintly, "This article of Chen has reason and evidence. Very good. Since the north of that as a mother still refuses to be peaceful, that's good. The secretary has to open his mouth a little wider for me." Xian Qima answered in a loud voice, "Yes, your majesty." The emperor's voice suddenly sounded a bit strange. "Servant Fan's son is now serving you as a deputy envoy?" Xian Qima did not expect that His Majesty would also be so concerned about Vice Envoy Fan. A few more drops of sweat flowed from his forehead, and he respectfully responded, "Precisely." The emperor seemed to be very interested in this matter. "Oh, this Fan Xian, I let him work as a co-counselor in the Taishan Temple. Why did you think of transferring him to the Honlu Temple?" Although His Majesty's voice was still gentle, Xian Qiji was so nervous that he was about to faint. He didn't dare to hide anything, and answered honestly, "A few days ago, I was lecturing at the East Palace under His Majesty's order, and I had talked to His Royal Highness about the matter of the invoice from the Northern Qi this time, because Fan Xian was related to this matter, and he had a lot of talent in the capital, and there was a Zhuang Mo Han in the invoice from the Northern Qi this time. And there was a talented person in the reception of the court, so my minister thought of transferring him to the Honlu Temple." "Talented person, so I took the liberty of making this suggestion, and your highness allowed it." The emperor behind the curtain appreciated the courtier's frank attitude. He was never afraid of someone in the court to form a party, but this party must be formed in the open. This matter is not for error. I will be the same day the matter is fully handed over to you to deal with, even if it is the crown prince. You do not have to ask for instructions. Yes. Xian Qiji's relationship with the crown prince was never intended to be hidden from His Majesty. After all, he himself was the person appointed by His Majesty to serve in the Eastern Palace that year. The emperor flipped through that dossier again, and vaguely seemed to frown. How did Fan Xian do? Xian Qima didn't dare to be greedy and honestly answered, "The dossier that your majesty is seeing at this time is exactly what Deputy Envoy Fan has painstakingly analyzed." Analyzed? For some reason, the emperor's tone became a bit irritated. "It's really getting more and more ridiculous." Xian Qima didn't know why His Majesty was angry, and was greatly panicked. It was a good thing that this matter did not seem to have much to do with the matter of the negotiations. After he exited the study, His Majesty the Emperor lifted the curtain and walked out, that face that was not angry and powerful. At this time, apart from a hint of annoyance, there was more than a hint of a hopelessly bitter smile. He instructed the eunuchs beside him, "Summon Chen Pingping to enter the palace." The eunuch softly led the order to go. The master of the country of Qing, the world's most powerful middle-aged man, walked out of the study, stood under the palace corridor, looked at the world that some of the dimming of the moon. The corner of his lips slightly curled, muttering to himself, "The country's weapon, not to directly assist the Honlu Temple, actually used to do the steps for the children to get ahead of the world. Good your Chen Pingping. It seems that if not to knock. You really want to send me that yard hands with that little child to play." The emperor is a personage. From the dossier, which is said to be analyzed by Fan Xian, he saw the shadow of the supervisory yuan at a glance. But looking at his expression, he didn't seem to be very angry, just a little amused. Xian Chimao's attempts to get the crown prince to draw in the Fan family actually catered to His Majesty's thoughts, the tendency of the Eastern Palace to finally show some political wisdom, and the fact that the crown prince seemed to have made some progress made the 9-5 Supreme Emperor feel slightly relieved. In the East Palace, a heated argument is breaking out. The two sides of the quarrel is the Honlu Temple Young Secretary Xian Chigu and the Palace Compiler Guobaoquan. The content of the quarrel, naturally, cannot be separated from that is called Fan Xian, the 8th grade officials. Look at both sides of the face, redneck thick appearance. We know the previous noise of the intensity of the degree. Shinchi thinks slightly with a hint of contempt, looked at Guobaoquan and said, "Do subjects, to do frank ministers, I was His Majesty's will, came to assist the prince, is to seek 1,000 years for the prince of the great cause, choose a good material. Concordance Lang Fan idle in the capital to have talent, view its recent behavior, know in and out, there are real talent, and the Fan family has always been the royal court, so the subjects, of course, the prince should be condescending to accept, cannot be because of some characters of the gas, will be rejected out of the door." Guobaoquan coldly laughed. Could it be that Lord Shaoqing thinks that this official is only remembering the hatred of that one punch? Don't you forget, the relationship between the Fan family and the Jing Wang family, and that Fan Xian, will soon become the son-in-law of the Chancellor's recent direction. Are you still not clear about it? Xian Chimao straightened his neck and said, "Not clear. I only know that there is only one His Majesty in the kingdom of Qing, and there is only one crown prince in the kingdom of Qing, and any attempt to artificially divide the factions in the court is extremely foolish." He wasn't a sourpuss with an empty ambition but no skill. Of course he knew that the second prince had recently caught fire, but strategically, he still believed that there was no need for the Eastern Palace to treat the second prince as a rival, and that once that happened, it would open a dangerous door. As long as the crown prince himself held himself upright and was righteous, there was simply no enemy to speak of. The crown prince sitting on the high ground side, he was indeed lustful and cowardly, but not a fool, and deep down in his heart he also knew clearly that Xian Shaoqing's view was undoubtedly the most correct if viewed from the perspective of the big picture. But politics has always been a struggle between you and me. Even if one is careful, who can guarantee that those squinting eyes to measure the throne of the two brothers will not do something? The situation at hand is not at that point. The crown prince rubbed his temples and said with some annoyance, "After all, this palace is the crown prince of a country. Reserving talents for the court is also the right thing to do. As for the imperial brothers' place, you guys don't say anything blindly, that's also too ridiculous. This was the helplessness in the palace. Obviously you defend me and I defend you, but verbally no one could say anything." Then Fan Xian? Guobaoquan was still somewhat undeterred. Xian Chiji said with a cold snort, "Lord Guo, I think you have been misjudging one thing." "What thing?" the crown prince asked curiously. "Many officials, including you, have categorized the Fan family into the second prince's faction because of the relationship between the Fan family and the Jing Wang family, but who has the evidence to prove this? This time, the Eastern Palace's brief decree has given Fan Xian an opportunity to show his face so much. If the Fan family is really as Lord Guo said, I'm only afraid that they wouldn't dare to take this errand at all." Xian Chimao continued coldly, "The most crucial part is that Fan Xian is about to become the Prime Minister's son-in-law, and for Lord Guo to use this to judge that Fan Xian is unlikely to be loyal to the Crown Prince is truly absurd." "What's absurd about it?" A hint of viciousness flashed in Guobaoquan's eyes. "Whether it's above the courtroom or in the shadows, the news has already shown that Lord Chancellor has already broken with the eldest princess, and is attempting to gradually detach himself from the influence of the palace. As a country's prime minister, it is only right that he should not be manipulated by palace figures." These words were a bit over the top. Xian Chimao snapped out of it and bowed to the crown prince to apologize. The crown prince shook his head indifferently, signaling him to continue. Xian Chima added, what Lord Guo said earlier is exactly where the problem lies. Everyone knows that Lord Chancellor broke with the princess. What does this have to do with the Eastern Palace? Does this mean that Lord Chancellor is no longer loyal to His Majesty? No longer on the side of His Highness? The Crown Prince frowned, but Auntie has also been very angry with Lord Chancellor recently. Your Highness, forgive me for being so arrogant. It is important not to change your attitude towards the Prime Minister because of the attitude of the eldest princess. Xian Chima said without being humble. Prince frowned deeper, but he wanted to say but stopped. Guo Baoquan took this opportunity to say coldly, but if the Prime Minister adults are still as before, why after the recent court meeting are not like the old days that come to the East Palace to ask for peace? Xian Chima smiled extremely confidently and responded, I have not denied this. Your Highness, right now it's just an arrangement. It's still far from the time when the two sides will compete for strength. A truly smart courtier will naturally cling to His Majesty, and that will be enough to maintain the longevity of his family. Lord Chancellor is the same. He may be oscillating between the Crown Prince and the Second Prince at the moment, but in the end, he will still follow His Majesty's will, and if we want Lord Chancellor to truly side with us. He took a deep breath. The key lies in Fan Xian. The Chancellor no longer has a true son. Fan Xian waits as if he is the future of the Lin family. If we can get Fan Xian to defect to His Highness, the Chancellor's attitude, naturally, will shift. Guo Baoquan snorted, the relationship between Prince Jing and Fan Xian, don't you forget. You should also not forget that the person who was found out the other day, whose subordinate he was. Xian Chima said indifferently, that person deliberately allowed Fan Xian and Your Highness to have a coincidental encounter, naturally hoping that Your Highness would remember the grudge from the other day and humiliate Fan Xian in order to make Fan Xian truly throw himself into his camp. Fortunately, Your Highness is wise and naturally would not fall for such a villain. The Crown Prince smiled gently, somewhat flattered. If the Fan family is truly of his faction, why would he need to use such tricks again? Xian Chima added, I believe that with the power of the Fan family, they will definitely be able to discover the hidden agenda behind this matter. If they really find out that it was that person who did it, Fan Xian will only hold a grudge, so there is no need to worry about the Fan family's current attitude. The Crown Prince was somewhat moved and said softly, if the Fan family is still in the dark and has fallen for that person's tricks, this palace might as well be able to tell him. Taking in Fan Xian is like taking in the Fan House and the Lin House, the two main forces in Kyoto, the civil officials as well as the powerful, at least half of them are looking at these two families. And a few years from now, I'm afraid that even the inner treasury will be run by this young scion. Xian Chima said softly to the Crown Prince, a small official of the 8th rank can bring more than just a few poems to the people of Kyoto, definitely.